A little while ago, Ali Lang approached Scott and I and asked us to lead this seminar. And he asked us to share a little bit of what God has been leading us in and the kind of things that he's been teaching us. And we thought it'd be really good to start by setting the scene a little bit, to think about what's been happening, a little bit about why we do what we do. And then Scott's going to help us explore a little bit around this topic of faith in the home, what it looks like to equip the primary disciplers in the lives of our children and young people. Following on from that, we're going to split you off into some breakout rooms. We'll give you a couple of questions to start thinking about. And then when we come back from our breakout rooms, I'll get us thinking about the importance of doing real life together. And then Scott's going to help us explore engaging youth in the wider church family. We'll then split off into another breakout room, again, to explore it a little bit more. And then we're going to take some time to pray for our young people, to pray for those working with young people, and also to pray for parents as well. And at the end, we will make sure that we finish all of that on the hour. But after that, if there are questions that you've got, Scott and I are both happy to hang around and to attempt to answer questions. Neither of us are particularly experts. We've got a lot of experience. We've been doing this for a while, but we wouldn't say we were experts in all of this. But what we can do is share some of our experience with you. So we're happy to hang around and answer any questions that people might have kind of into the time after the official time. But as we prayed earlier on this week for what we were going to do and what we were going to share, Scott prayed that no one who came along, no one who was part of this would feel burdened by this session, but instead that every one of us would feel liberated, knowing that the salvation of our young people, and of course everyone, is in the hands of God himself. And so, as I say, what we want to talk about today isn't complicated stuff. I think most of you will go away thinking that's pretty simple stuff, or I've heard that before, but maybe I just needed reminded of it again. And I can tell you, neither of us are doing super complicated things in our ministries. What we are doing might come across quite simple to you, really. So thinking a bit then about the current state of things. Yesterday saw us hit 7 months since lockdown was enacted. It was the 23rd of March, or 23rd of October. And the ground beneath us has shifted. And I think most of us would agree that it's felt like the goalposts started to shift sometime back in March, and they just haven't stopped moving since. We keep thinking we've got it sorted, we think we know what we can do, and suddenly something moves and another set of guidelines come in and everything's back up in the air again. And how we have engaged with young people, how we've ministered to young people has changed overnight. It had to change overnight. Many of us have taken up using technologies we never thought we would. And some people have done the most amazing things using that technology. We've learnt lots. We've found new ways and even old ways to connect. Some people have seen an increase in their connection with young people. And many of us have found that online has given us opportunities to connect in more and better ways than before. Others have found this season simply made them more creative about how to connect. And some people have seen the most amazing fruit from that. And I just want to honour that and recognise that right now. There are people who have seen amazing fruit in working with and engaging with young people in this season. Many of us have seen massive improvement in our digital skills. We were talking about this earlier on this week, and actually around the idea of video editing. And I said, do you know, my video editing skills have increased hugely simply through necessity. I have had to do so much of it and had to produce stuff so quickly that I've had no choice but to get better at it. In January, many of us didn't even know what Zoom was. Yet if you're anything like me, now the verb zooming is part of your everyday vocabulary. And there have been advantages and blessings in this season simply through the goodness of God. But in the same breath, many of us have found it difficult to connect with young people. We may have seen disconnection as an ever increasing problem. We entered into this digital world with an excitement of knowing that that was often where young people were, that they were hanging out in that space. And so we thought if we could meet them there, then we could have great connection with them. And I personally have really struggled with the fact that we entered into this space, yet we have found an increasing disconnection in that space. And it wasn't until kind of mid-July I heard Dr. Kate Middleton speak on this. She works for the Mind and Soul Foundation and speaks brilliantly on this stuff, that I began to actually understand maybe a little bit of what was going on here. And I've termed it on the slide as space invasion. She spoke about young people having viewed the online space as theirs, as the place where they could retreat away from adults, they could retreat away from the stresses and strains of things like school. And then all of a sudden, the 23rd of March, they found that space, that retreat space for them, invaded by adults and by all the stresses of things like school. Also, even with our growth in skills and learning, I'm pretty sure if you're anything like me, you have discovered massive skill gaps as well. There are things that you still haven't quite worked out how to do. And I know for me, I started to find massive skill gaps in my own skills, but then also trying to help a team who found skill gaps themselves as well. And I think this season has increased the difference between the good and the bad, the positive and the negative. And I found those things sitting in tension in a greater way than I've ever felt it before. I've taken the disconnection really hard. And I know many others who have taken the disconnection really hard. Spoken, as I say before, with some youth pastors who say that's not their experience, but the majority of people I've spoken with have acknowledged that that has been their experience. But maybe young people disengaging is just what we need to put up with. Is there a reason to keep pushing in to working with young people and to keep engaging with young people? Working in youth ministry for a number of years, I've experienced the tension that we're constantly presented with about numbers. How many bums can we get on seats? Do we have plenty of young people, and how do we translate that into increased numbers in our church congregations? So often that's been coupled with a desire to have young people about to stop the church dying out. And I hear that phrase a lot. We need young people to stop the church dying. Our churches are getting older, and so we feel like we need young people around to keep us relevant. In Bonhoeffer, as youth worker, Andrew Root explores the life, work and writings of Dietrich Bonhoeffer, and especially his work and writings around work with young people and ministry to them. And he says we can only minister to youth if we see our ministries as not forgetting the spirit of young people into the church, but for the encountering of the Holy Spirit with young people in the church community. It cannot be, and it is not, a church growth strategy. And so as we explore engaging with young people today, we encourage you to hold on to that. This is not about bringing a young spirit into our churches. This is not about a church growth strategy. It's understanding that just as you and I are children of God, so are young people. Just as we are part of the body, so can our young people be. And just as we grow in faith and the fruit of the Spirit and have gifts released in us, so do our young people. The point of all this youth stuff is that the souls of young people matter. The lives of young people matter, and the promise of Jesus that we will receive life and life in all its fullness is as much for them as it is for us. Also, when we don't engage with young people, we miss out on something of being the whole family of God. God will teach us so much through them, just as he teaches them through us. Scott's going to start exploring how we do a bit of this now, looking at faith in the home.
Thanks, Kaz. So just following on from what Kaz was saying, so over lockdown, one of the silver linings that I found was that I was actually able to connect with a lot of other people from across Scotland. So maybe some of yourselves and others, just in conversations of where we're looking to encourage each other and share ideas. But one topic of conversation that came up time and time again was discipleship. And when it came up, it was mostly talked about in a concerned fashion regarding youth volunteers, workers, pastors, their interaction with young people and how they'd seen that reduce significantly throughout lockdown. So some folks, they hadn't seen much of their youth since March time, and I'll say that in my group, there's been a few that I've not seen since March. Others were seeing real inconsistency. Some people were getting really, or youth were getting really tired of online content. They were looking at a laptop or an iPad throughout the whole day, then at the weekends as well, and so it was getting too much for them. So it led to some major concerns and questions. Sorry, hold on. I think I've gone one too far there. And so I began to ask some questions about discipleship, and it led me to a few points. So first of all, so most of our churches will probably celebrate baby dedications, and in that time, the parents and the whole church family, we make commitments to the best of our ability to care for and to disciple this baby. So there's a guy called Paul Tripp, and he speaks of how our faith is a group, it's a community project, and we all need one another in the power of the Holy Spirit to point one another to Jesus. So it's not just one person's sole job, and we make that very public. However, what we as youth workers must remember is that the primary discipler in a young person's life are the parents or the guardians. In Deuteronomy 6, 5 through 9, we read these words. It says, "And you must love the Lord your God with all your heart and all your soul and all your strength. And you must commit yourselves wholeheartedly to these commands that I am giving you today. Repeat them again and again and again to your children. Talk about them when you're at home and when you're on the road, when you're going to bed and when you're getting up. Tie them to your hands and wear them on your foreheads as reminders. Write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates." So we must remember that discipleship, yes, it is a church-wide, it is a community-wide role, but within that, God has given parents and guardians an increased responsibility. So as we look at what discipleship means, and specifically the example that Jesus gave, I think we can say that over lockdown, we've actually had an opportunity for discipleship to increase. So let me just explain that. So in Jesus' day, a disciple was someone who effectively spent their entire time with their mentor, their leader. And so they ate with them, they shared digs, they walked with them. Effectively what they did was that they observed them each moment of the day. And that has been enabled like almost no other time for this generation, maybe even for a number of generations. So if you think back to the start of lockdown, we had almost 3 months of young people permanently at home. And even now, the time we spend at home, I think is probably vastly increased to previous years. So our young people have lived, breathed, they've had all their meals with their parents or guardians. They've had a chance to observe them like at no other point. So I think when we're thinking discipleship, we need to see, do we actually have opportunity here? And so this opens up questions for us. I'm kind of assuming that everyone here has the least interest in youth, maybe works weekly with youth, but it leads us to ask some questions of how do we as youth leaders support that? Yes, youth leaders and youth workers, we have a big role, as often young people are more receptive to speaking to others than their parents on certain topics. And we'll come to that later on, but this needs to exist alongside what the parents are doing. And so I was kind of muddling this kind of stuff over, probably in June time, it was really kind of hitting home. And so over the summertime, I started making some plans for, okay, so how am I going to do something about this? So what it's led me to do is to plan probably about 3 evenings per year solely for the parents of those in the youth group. And so I've done one of these already. So I did one back in the start of September. I'll probably run another one in January, and then one probably in May time. And so, but the purpose of that was to bring the parents and the youth work closer together, and for us, and well, specifically really for me, to support of what is happening at home. And so I took the opportunity to explain what we're doing in the youth group, and I normally send like an email out once every 2 months, just with a bit of an update of what we're doing and what's coming up. But actually being able to share this face to face, I use Zoom for it. I found really useful. So explain what we're studying, why we're doing that, and I was able to suggest some ways that they can further engage with that at home. I could ask what areas of struggle parents were seeing in their young people, and then I was able to take some notes from that and consider how does that impact what I plan to do in the youth group. In that time, I was also able to ask how we can support them. And I was able to provide some resources, and so I put like a few PowerPoint screens together of like suggested reading on different topics, and I was like, you know, if your young person is asking questions on this, read this book yourself, and then give it to them and read it again with them. I was able to suggest some devotionals for them as well. In that time, I plan to share on one specific topic as well, so to try and give a bit of insight into things. And so in September, I spoke about social media and the impact that has on it. And so the week before that session, there had been a video going around on Facebook and Instagram. It was a suicide video. And this was impacting so many young people. And if you asked probably everyone in your youth group, I reckon about 70, 80% of them, if not more, might have seen it. And so I was able to speak into this, and I was able to say, you know, here are some resources for you to consider looking at. And in fact, there was an organization the next week called CyberSafe Scotland, who were doing a session specifically for parents about how do you talk to your young person about what they've seen. And so I was able to speak to them about some of those things. We were able to take time collectively to pray for all the young people in the church, and that was a really special time, just having some of the youth leaders and the parents just lifting up our voices for all the young people. And then myself and I've got a trainee, Dan, we spent time praying for the parents, specifically for them as being those disciplers. And again, I find that a really special time. And so, as I said, I've only ran one of these sessions so far, and so they probably will evolve over time. And so I don't know, maybe you guys have run something like this before, and I'm just really late to the party. And if you've done one of these kind of things before, I'd be really interested to hear more about what you have done in that space. But I kind of want to see what's next. So how can you consider how you can have an impact on your young people, but indirectly? And so how can you walk alongside the parents and the guardians? How can you support them? How can you equip them for what they are called to do? And for anyone who's a parent, you know you've got like 100 things on your plate. And so looking for resources, and that can be pretty difficult. And so if we can provide some of those and just be a listening ear for them, how can we support them and encourage them? And just be there, you know, if you've got some problems, come and speak to me. And again, it's promising no answers, but sometimes people just want someone to stand with them. As you can see on the screen, I left this with them, and I think it's a pretty powerful statement. And so our ability to parent God's way begins, matures, and ends with living the cross-centered life. And ultimately, the biggest gift you'll ever give your child is showing them the wonder of the cross as you marvel at it yourself. And so that's what I really wanted to leave the parents with. It was just like, just marvel at Jesus. Let them observe you of your love and your awe for Jesus as your Lord and Savior. And so I really wanted to leave that as the final comment, because I find that pretty freeing and liberating thing. It's just like, it's not all about strategies here. It's about how do you live in front of your young person that you love Jesus with all your heart, your soul, and your mind. So that's just something that I've been thinking about the last few months, and I wanted to share with yourselves. We're going to pop into breakout rooms, and so we've just got 2 questions for you. So the first one is, what has your experience been over the last 7 months? And what we'll say is, if yours has been really positive, please do share it. We want to hear those stories of just, and you can share a bit of what you've done in that. But if your story has been probably quite similar to mine, has been a mixed bag, it's good to hear those as well, and how we can support each other and how we can pray for one another. And that second question, how can we encourage and support discipleship in the home? It'd be good for us just to consider ways that we can be doing that. So we're going to pop into breakout rooms. So you'll have 9 minutes in total for this. You'll see a little countdown timer as well, and you're going to get 60 seconds at the end. So if you've got something burning on your heart to say, when it comes with that 60 seconds, make sure you get in there quick before we come back. What we'd also love to do is someone just take a few notes. So if you can maybe type those, and then when we come back together, if you can pop those in the chat. And then what we would like to do is keep a note of all of those. And if you'd like a copy of all those things that people have been talking about, we can send it out to you later on today or in the next week. So Neil, if you're okay opening up the breakout rooms, that'd be great. We'll see you all soon.
So I just want to explore a little bit of this topic of real life. Scott's given us actually quite a good introduction to it, thinking about parents and guardians as well. But in June 2020, Netflix statistics, I can't even speak now, Netflix statistics suggested that 165 million hours of Netflix were consumed every single day. 165 million hours a day of Netflix consumed. And back in 2018, it was suggested with, at that time, the average user spending 1 hour and 11 minutes on Netflix. So that was no lockdown binging. That was before all of this. 1 hour and 11 minutes watching Netflix each day, and less than 40 minutes a day bonding with either their children or their friends or in their marriage, that our consumption far outweighs the quality time we spend with one another. 1 hour and 11 minutes for the average user of Netflix, yet only less than 40 minutes of quality time with somebody in our life that we should be spending quality time with. Add to that a spending of around $17 billion on content this year for Netflix, and I could forgive you for wondering how we're supposed to compete. And that's just Netflix. What about Amazon Prime, Apple TV, Disney Plus, other movie and sports subscriptions, even just regular TV? And then add on to the top of it things like gaming. I've been on the pastoral team here at Queen's Park, as I said, for just over 6 years now, and we have 6 statements that we've committed to as a church. And one of these continually, even after 6 years, stands out to me and keeps coming back and challenging me again and again. And it says this: we commit to be a church that experiences real life together in all circumstances by nourishing people, honouring one another, and enabling people to taste abundant life in Jesus, to belong and contribute to the church family, and so reach their full potential. Really, it's quite a wordy way of saying we're going to walk life together. The ups and the downs, and even if it gets messy, and we all know it will and it does get messy, but we're going to do it together, and we're going to make sure everybody knows they're part of the family. Research tells us that for young people, it's not a high entertainment youth group or a high production value youth group that keeps them around church, but the thing that helps most young people to grow into committed followers of Jesus, to be active long-term members of the church family, is relationships, and particularly relationships with other adults, which Scott's going to touch on a little bit more in a few minutes. It's all about doing real life together. We have a loneliness epidemic in our society, which we had even before the pandemic. Loneliness was a major issue. And society for years now has become increasingly privatized and individualistic. We've been told that as soon as we're done with work or school, we go home, we shut our doors, and we keep ourselves to ourselves. And the more people I've spoken to of all ages in this season, the more I hear a desire for simply doing life with others. And one of the reasons I believe we've seen disconnect from our young people in some of the is because of some of the difficulties we've experienced in nurturing this real life together, in nurturing real life relationship in the online space. We've been able to keep some level of relationship, but a lot of the depth of it has been lost. We've missed experiences like Soul Survivor. We've missed having things like our weekends away. And anyone who's ever led a camp for young people will know that often the most influential moments for those young people are not that big, high budget, polished events, but they're the simple sharing of a meal together. It's the laughing together, celebrating the life wins and grieving the losses together. And this is what we see in Acts. This is the model of church we're given in Acts. In that early church, they gathered together. It talks about the sharing of meals, of sharing everything together, sharing life together. Each year at Queen's Park, we've run a leadership school for our S6s. We have huge amounts of content over the whole year, delivered in ways that we've been working on for a number of years. Our young people do lots of work in and out the sessions. But what makes the greatest impact every time is conversations over a meal, like the one in the picture, about how they've led amongst a group of friends when two of them have fallen out, or how they've coped with the stress of exams. It's just those moments that are not planned, that are not scripted, but are just given space to happen. 2 years ago on our youth weekend away, as I prepared to lead a session for our S4s to 6s, I got a phone call saying that my dad had collapsed and paramedics were working on him and it didn't look good. I was in Aviemore and I needed to rush back to Glasgow. And as I left Aviemore, the second call came in to say that he hadn't made it. And a number of my young people came along to his funeral. They shared a moment of real life with me. So not only was I sharing real life in their life, but they were sharing with my life as well. My young people wept with me in my grief, just as I weep with them in their grief. When I was ordained, my young people were celebrating with me. They were part of that. And as they celebrated with me, as I celebrate with them in their wins and in the joys of their lives. And we need to find ways to prioritize this, whatever season we're in. It's taking the extra time to connect, sending a text rather than simply commenting on something on Instagram, making it personal, meeting for a coffee in a coffee shop or going for a walk in this season. Maybe following whatever guidelines you've got in the area you live in, sharing a takeaway in the back garden with your thermals on and the fire pit on, but actually just doing it and sharing it where we're at. Go old school and write your young people a letter. Ask questions of how they're coping with certain things and share some of your highlights and lowlights. Some examples of the ways we've tried to give priority to experiencing real life with young people in this season is that we did that. We hand wrote notes to every single one of our young people multiple times during lockdown. And this actually had the greatest response over everything we did. It's not fancy, it's not modern. We use proper snail mail, we put a stamp on it and we put it in the post and sent it to them. We've prioritised small groups in our sessions, and we give, yes, discussion questions, but actually if there's another conversation that needs to take place, that is given the space to happen for our young people. For the first 6 weeks of lockdown, during the most stringent guidelines, we offered a 1 hour kind of drop-in chat session on Zoom. No agenda, no plan, didn't know who was turning up each day. We were just present and whatever came in, came in. We've had different team members take a few weeks out at different times because we've been finding life really hard in this season. And we've been honest with our young people about that. We've not shared everything about this is a diagnosis they've had from the doctor or this is what, but actually this person's not here because they are finding life hard and just being honest. We've also spent at least 7 weeks exploring our emotions and mental health, and including a lot of testimony from our leaders as well. So having our different youth leaders share testimony of their own struggles with mental health, but sharing honestly about dealing with their own emotions as well. As I say, it's not scripted, it's not big budget, it doesn't compete with Netflix, but it is who and what we are called to be. Therefore, it's so much greater than the world of entertainment. It has a much greater impact. We don't need to compete with the entertainment world because relationship with Jesus and his church is our purpose and our calling. Scott sent me a quote earlier in the week, which I think sums this up really well. To be salt and light in the world does not require a person to do extraordinary acts or amass spectacular influence. The world does not need more ambitious Christians, or I would even say higher production standards in our youth ministry, but rather salt and light are the outcomes of ordinary lives lived in rich communion with God and with one another. Our world needs more of those, and so do our young people. Scott.
Thanks, Kaz. So just moving on, and this is kind of looking at discipleship a little bit more differently from, how can we do this? So over the last 6 months and potentially for some time to come, spending time in person with our youth groups, it will look different, and trying to find spaces where we can have those deeper discussions. It can be harder, but one possible way to ensure these discussions take place are in one-to-one mentor relationships. And so these are extremely useful times, and before COVID they were, and I think they probably are even more so now. As you'll know, so mentoring is something the Apostle Paul speaks of in depth, and so I've got something called Imitate Me, and so this is what I have for the 6th years in my youth group. And for the mentors and for the young people, I take them through 1 Thessalonians 1 and 2. So I'm just going to share a few verses from there. So chapter 1, verse 6 says, "And you became mentors of us and the Lord." Chapter 2, 7 to 8 says, "But we were gentle among you, like a nursing mother taking care of her own children. So being affectionately desirous of you, we were ready to share not only the gospel of God, but also our own selves, because you have become very dear to us." And then in chapter 2, verses 11 and 12, it says, "For you know how, like a father and his children, we exhorted each of you and encouraged you and charged you to walk in a manner worthy of God, who calls you into his own kingdom and glory." So mentoring, I think, is a place where deeper conversations can happen, where there is that exhortation, there's that encouragement, there's that charge, but there's that real gentleness as well. And these mentoring relationships are a place where real deep conversations on faith, questions, advice can be shared on decisions, prayer requests can be shared, and tough questions can really be asked. And I mean that going both ways. I think it's really important for the young person to know that they have a safe space where they can ask questions. If they've got doubts, to know that they can come to this person and say, "Well, I've got this question on this." And also the other way of where the mentor can say, "How are you getting on in this area of your life? How is your relationship with Jesus going?" So within my youth group, I've offered this to everyone who's in their final year. So they're mostly 6th years. As I think this is what we as a church can do well. And so I think you need to understand, what can your church do well here? Like, we probably understand that all young people could do with a mentor, but actually trying to find a mentor for every youth group, it might be too much. You need to figure out, okay, so where does your focus want to be? And what can you as a church do really well? So for me, up in Aberdeen, it seems to be a lot of the youth seem to kind of flee from Aberdeen a little bit. I don't know why, it's a lovely place. But for university, a lot of them head down to the Central Belt. And so if any of my youth appear in your churches, please look after them. But I want in that last year for us to be really intentional to invest in them. So my experience has shown that I don't think the age of the mentor matters. In fact, from my experience over the last few years, the older ones have generally done a better job. And so I've got, I think there's about 5 or 6 of them being mentored this year. And the average age of my mentors is 50. The youngest is 40. And the youngest last year was 36. So in a mentor, the young people, I don't think they're looking for someone who is cool. So don't try to be. And that's something I think we all need to learn. We need to be ourselves. They're looking for authentic. They're looking for genuine friendship. They're looking for an example of real faith and someone to listen to. They're not looking for someone with all the answers. In fact, I think it's good for young people to hear us say, I don't know, from time to time, but I think they're looking for someone to find the answers with. I think this also allows the youth to engage and build friendships with those who are of a different age group in the church. And that's coming back to what something that Kaz was saying earlier on as well. And yeah, one of my mentors last year, 2 weeks into it, so she was 36, she had a 1-year-old little girl, and 2 weeks into the mentorship, the little girl got diagnosed as having cancer. And so I went to Vanessa and was like, look, if you don't want to do this anymore, I completely understand, I can find someone else. And she was like, no, this is real life. She needs to see this. And so when they got together, they often got together in the hospital around the bed. And I thought there was something pretty powerful in that. So if you look a bit more information about what I do, I'd love to share that with you. You can ask some more questions later on. The final point to speak on is just engage youth with the wider church. Be creative with how you engage young people in your services. With so much happening online, we're entering their world, and some of them are very skilled at this. We asked one of our young people to do the children's talk in the service one week, and I'll tell you what, we were blown away by what she produced. I honestly think it was one of the best things that we've shown on YouTube over the last 6 months. Visually, it was brilliant. And so she had got a good camera for it. She had done some great video editing. It was funny, and the content was really good. Ask them to do children's talks, to do scripture readings, prayers. Ask them to help with video editing, with music. Take a chance on them. We often hear that youth are the church of the future, but they are the church of today. So some of it, you have to take a risk on them. Some of it is going to go belly up. It really is. But that's just an opportunity for us to display grace. But more often than not, I think youth surprise us. And they love just to have the opportunity to be involved. So for us at Hillview, I think we'd probably fallen into a bit of a habit of having fewer people involved in our services up until March time, but as soon as lockdown hit, it became a real priority for us to engage as many people in our services as we could, and so we were asking lots of people to do different things, and it's really important that the young people are part of that. Engage them, it will bless them and it will bless others. And it moves them from being people who simply observe church to being people who are a part of a church family. And so we've got 2 questions for you. So the first one is, what are 2 things you can put into practice to experience real life with your young people, and how can you engage young people across the breadth of your church? So we're going to do the same time in the breakout rooms. We're going to run slightly over, apologies for that. And in that time, so we'd also like you just to pause for the last few minutes in prayer. And so just really simple things here. Please pray for the young people in our nation. Let's pray for all the youth leaders across Scotland. Let's pray for the parents and guardians who disciple each and every day. And so we're just going to put you into those breakout rooms now. So you'll have the same 8-9 minutes. And then we'll come back. And as Kaz said, if anyone's got any questions, you're more than welcome to stay on a bit longer, and Kaz and I will do our best to try and answer some of them. So enjoy the time in the breakout rooms, and we'll see you soon.
We were going to send you a message saying don't forget to pray, but then we got distracted and forgot to send the message. So apologies for that. But thank you so much for joining us today. If you didn't get a chance to pray, go and take some time to do that, whether that's today, tomorrow, this week. Gather your teams, those around you who are working with young people. You know, we encourage you to do something like Scott's been doing. I know I'm taking Scott's idea of the way of doing a parents meeting, a parents gathering, and I'm going to do that with our parents actually this Wednesday. So go and do something like that. Gather parents together simply to pray. I know one of the most powerful things that we have is that we have a mum's WhatsApp group and a dad's WhatsApp group in our church, and the mums gather to pray and the dads gather to pray and just pray blessing over children and the families and what's going on. And I've had multiple times where they've contacted me and said, can you send us a list of the first names of every teenager that we've got in the church? And they've prayed for every kid by name. So do that. Go and take some time to pray. If it's your cat that you need to gather to pray with just now, that's fine, but just gather somebody or something and pray. And let's pray for our young people. Let's pray for the families that they're in, whether those families know and love Jesus or haven't yet encountered him. But let's pray for them. And we just want to bless you in the name of Jesus as you go to work with young people. Bless you for in all the encounters that you have with them, whether they're your own children, your own grandchildren, whether they're others in your church community or in the wider community as well. Be blessed in those relationships with them. As we say, we're going to draw the formal part of our time together to a close. So if you need to leave, feel free to do that. Happy to do that. If, however, you do have a question that you want to ask and you're happy to hang around, we are available to hang around and attempt to answer some questions. So if you want to go, that's fine. But if you want to ask a question, turn your microphone on and ask a question. So.
Can I share something with you that is literally just come up on my timeline, and it's just so appropriate to what you've just said, Kaz, and it was actually something that Pete Gregg posted last year, and it says, "Dear youth leader, here's what I'd like you to hear this week. The single most important thing you will ever do for your young people is not to preach at them, not to run programs for them, and not to impress them with your almost superhuman ability to memorize the entire lyrical score to Hamilton. Your highest priority is to pray for them." Amen. That's on my timeline today, and I just love that. Sorry, I just thought I'd share.
No, that's great. It's such a great encouragement, and I would say, like, I don't know how much other stuff people have managed to engage with so far this weekend, but it seems like that's the theme coming out time and time again, is we need to be a people of prayer first and foremost, people of prayer in all of this. So yeah, completely.
I'm just going to ask one more question, then I have to go, if that's okay. Scott, how did you engage the parents? Sometimes I feel like there's only three. We're in between youth workers just now. There's only three of us, but we've got quite a lot of youth, which is fine. We're running no problem. But I'd like to know, because I'm quite interested how you got the parents to engage, because we can't always get them to even look at an email.
Yeah, it's true.
And I'm sure you all have the same experience.
So I guess one thing I should have said, I had about a third of the parents come along to it, and so a lot didn't. And so I kind of took that third as a bit of a win, to be honest, because you're right, trying to get them. And like, folks are busy with things as it is. And so I normally put out emails to folks, like, as I said, once every 2 months. And so in June time, when this kind of circling around my head, I popped the idea on there. And then in August, when we're coming into the new session, I kind of put something firmer on an email there. And then 2 weeks before it, I put it out in another email. And so I was just trying to make sure that people were constantly aware of it. If I saw them or I was speaking to them, I'd mention it. It's one of these things that you can only offer it, and then it's up to people if they're going to take it or not. And I think that's all you can do. And so, to be honest, if 3 or 4 had come along to it, I think I would have been okay in the end, because I just think I want people to know that I'm here for them, to encourage them and to listen to them, and they get a chance to hear my heart. My hope is that for the next one, it will have a few more people in it. Generally, the feedback has been really good on it, and they even just like the time to discuss things amongst themselves. And so I did a bit of presentation in it, but I tried to keep it very conversational, and so folks felt free to like interject and ask questions, and I think they found it a useful forum for them to be together and kind of share experience as well. But it is the kind of thing, you're not going to get them all, but you'll get the ones who are keen. And sometimes we just need to persevere. So ask me in a year's time how it's going, and I'll let you know.
Can I just ask, is there a group somewhere, a private group, either on Facebook or WhatsApp, where people working with young people across Scotland through the Baptist Church can share what's going well, share some ideas that they're using, just a place to meet a little bit more often and sort of chat?
There isn't. There isn't a Baptist specific one as far as I'm aware. There is one called Youth and that, like YOOF, classic Des. So that's Des from Alpha that set that up, and it's literally just if you email Des at Alpha, he can get you added in to that. But it's
Okay.
and that's a wider than just Baptist churches. Ali has tried to facilitate a few different conversations throughout this time, and if that's something that you were looking for, a quick email to Ali, and he's always up for, if that's something that's going to help people, I know he's up for organising those. I'm just going to throw him under the bus. He's not here to
I mean, I think it would certainly help me because I'm quite new to the Baptist Church as well as youth work. So yeah, but I mean, if something's already existing, then.
So whereabouts are you?
In Livingston at Dedridge.
Cool. Well, I'm totally happy for you to get in touch with me. I'm happy to chat about. I'm not an expert in everything, but I've been around this for a little while. I've 12 years or so in Scottish Baptist churches doing this kind of stuff. So totally happy. I'm just Kaz, CAZ at qpbc.org. Like anybody that wants to get in contact about stuff, we keep it simple. Don't keep our job title simple, but we keep our email addresses simple. So Kaz at qpbc.org. And honestly, like totally happy to do a Zoom chat when we're allowed to meet in person. I love doing coffee with people, so
Me too. That's fine.
People in the east
Thank you.
and the west that I meet up with, and just find somewhere halfway or whatever, go to one place or the other and just meet up and do that. So totally, particularly if you're new in and around, like I can introduce you to people. That's the way forward in Scotland, I do have to say, is getting introduced to some people. So
Wonderful. Thank you.
so just message me and we can sort something out.
I know the
Great,
Baptist Union have done some, like, I don't know what they're called, like innovative collective things. And so Neil, I think you might be a part of one actually. I could be wrong here, but
I think I might have been chucked. I didn't make the cut.
oh no, shocking. Anyways,
one. If that helps, was Adam.
No, I am in one.
So there's a few of you in them, and so I don't know how they've kind of come about, but they're kind of like groupings of people together to try and share innovative ideas at the moment. And so, Mary, if you're keen to be in one of those, you contact Ali, and then I think he would assign you to a group. I don't know how it works, but it's maybe worth checking out on, and I've heard good things about them.
Great, thank you. Thanks.
Can I ask you, Mary, have you got other churches near you? Not necessarily Baptist, but other, I mean, we've got an Ayrshire youth leaders group. We meet up and we meet with, and we put all our, well, when we were able to, we used to meet once a month with all of our youth together so that they got to know the youth from other churches and all denominations. I can't remember, it doesn't matter. Anyway, and then we did Soul Survivor together, so we all went with about 60 young people. It was just fabulous, absolutely fabulous. So if you can get even a smaller group round about you and the support of other youth workers, I think is helpful.
Brilliant, thank you.
Can I jump in and ask a question?
Yes, John.
Thank you. So we've kind of found, I suppose it kind of links to some of the things we've been talking about, like you were saying with the parents, you've got like the third who kind of engaged, and it's your keen ones that you'll get engaging. Similarly, with the young folks, we found our keen ones have still engaged with things pretty well. Our middle of the road kind of keen ones are still middle of the road, they engage with some things. The ones who are more on the fringes, who maybe came along because their folks made them come along to church, this has been quite an easy opportunity for them to kind of drop away from church things, and it's been really tough to keep them engaged. Which, to be fair, actually, I think is true for the adults in the congregation as well as the young people. There's a lot of folks who suddenly decided that actually Sunday mornings being free is a really nice thing. But I wonder if you've got any thoughts, any advice on how to try and kind of re-engage with the ones who are a bit more on the fringes. We've tried doing some social things, some quizzes and games nights. We've done some more Bible study things. We've done some in-person things. It's the same ones we get. Like the keen ones come along to all these different things, and the other ones don't really seem up for any of it. So any ideas?
I would say ditto. We'd been there and like tried, literally just like threw everything up in the air and tried to catch everything. Was kind of what we did. The absolute best thing that I have found in engaging the kids who are on the fringes, and I had some kids who hadn't been in youth for 6 months, like we hadn't seen their faces for 6 months, even when we were meeting in person. Wrote them a letter, hand wrote them a letter. They've been at youth every week since.
Okay.
And like, it blew my mind that actually putting pen to paper, sticking a stamp on it and put it in the post box was what it took. I mean, we tried everything. We tried all sorts of fancy things and things at different times and in different ways and all the rest of it. And it was pen to paper. And they were like, oh, you cared about me enough to do that just for me. Now, we also, in our notes, so different leaders did them differently. I had one leader who got printed off postcards with the last youth weekend away photo on them for all of his group and wrote on the back of them, my mum makes handmade cards. I got her to make me a whole load of cards, and then with like different sayings and stuff on them. And so I had different ones for all the ones in my group. But we just tried to include a prayer or a prophetic word in each one of them when we sent them out to the kids as well. And actually when they were reading them, not only had we remembered their name, but they knew we'd taken time to pray for them. And I think, like, that's what I'm saying, it's old school and it's like back to core basics, but you took some time to pray for a kid and you took the time and the effort to handwrite it. And it just, I've never known anything bring back the return that did.
So I did the same thing back in August time, because I was like, there's some that I haven't seen and I want to have a connection with them. I want to be able to encourage them. So I was like, right, I'm going to write them a letter. And so I'm not too sure I've seen the same impact that Kaz has seen, but I have seen some re-engage. I got some letters back from some of them. They spent some time writing a letter back to me, mainly thanking me for the chocolate bar that I put in the envelope as well. That went down a treat.
You're nice.
But for many of the young people, they had never received a letter before. For some of them, this was the first letter that they'd ever received. And so sometimes they'll get a card through the post, but then they get a letter through the post. And like everything's done through email or like text message and stuff like. So for a lot of them, it was a completely new experience having it. And there was something exciting about it coming through the door for them. And so I'll admit, I think it is worth doing. It takes time. It really does.
I suppose the personal engagement of that really shows actually a level of care that firing out a group text message maybe just doesn't. So, which, as you say, it totally makes sense. But yeah, no, that's.
Yeah, I do that. I'm going to do it again, probably coming up, probably in November, early December time, and put in something for Christmas with them, like a little gift of some sort. But again, with a personal kind of letter to them, and it's just praying that the Spirit will do something with that. Like with our little efforts, He can do amazing, great big things. It's like it's all the whole loaves and fishes. We just take our little and let the Spirit do the rest. And so, yeah. Again, it doesn't need to be like, we don't need to produce a Netflix video or something. Sometimes writing a letter works.
We're going to do it again at Christmas. We're going to do it with Christmas cards, but again, bless my mother, like advertised for her, she just made me 70 individual Christmas cards to go to my young people. But we're going to
have an Etsy that we can all go and buy them from.
She's got a Facebook page, but I can tell you that later. But just actually, like, we've got the cards, we're going to handwrite them. And I was, you know, as a church, we often produce a Christmas card and it's kind of printed and you literally write a person's name in, a quick wee message, whatever, but we're going to fully handwrite the cards. And we were like, that's actually the kind of really important bit in this, is just that. And as I say, it takes time, but actually the kids get the time it's taking you to do it. That was the thing that blew I was a bit like, well, they don't know, they're not used to this, so therefore they'll just be like, oh, whatever. But actually it was just such a novelty, such a special thing for them, that they were like, you must have taken so much time to sit and do this. And they did appreciate it. We had some back as well. We got ones back, we didn't send them chocolate, so you know. You don't have to put chocolate in with your letters. But yeah, I never thought I'd be sitting here at this point where we're like, oh, look at this amazing digital revolution that we've had and all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, write a letter and put a stamp on it and put it in the post box. So yeah.
Awesome, thank you.
I told you it wasn't complicated what we were doing. It wasn't anything new. Proper.
That suits me well.
I think it's part of it, like these conversations are really important so we can share these ideas from that. Like a lot of what I've shared, I've picked up from other people. Like there's very little original coming from me, to be honest. And so it is finding these kind of places to have these conversations. So yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Thank you, everyone.